Hello, my name is Kai, and before I get into it, I'd like to thank you guys for 100 subscribers. I did not expect I would reach 100 subscribers so quickly, but anyway, I wanted to create this series called Extra Time, where I'm gonna pick out some of the comments, in this case, most of the comments that I thought were interesting, and address some of the questions that you guys had. Now, as someone who is an amateur football analyst, I think it's important that I address when I've potentially made mistakes or give clarification where necessary for some things that maybe I didn't explain in depth. Now, without lingering on this too much, let's look at the comments. So the first comment I got was, if Flo plays as a left winger, what will happen to Gakpo or Diaz? Well, I personally think that Diaz is getting sold, which would make Gakpo the backup left winger. But in the world that we also keep Luis Diaz, I think Diaz is just our starting striker with Jota as his backup, because I do see Nunes and Chiesa as definitely getting sold. I mean, there's a chance that Chiesa stays, but he wouldn't be anything more than Mo's backup. So, in reality, Diaz is now kind of our starting striker, and Gakpo is likely our backup left winger. The next comment I got was Isak/Ekitike are pretty capable of doing the false nine role while still being a top source of goals, and Ekitike is the most mobile 9 you've seen recently. Now, I do agree that Ekitike is very mobile, he's very athletic, and he's very fast, and I do think that Isak and Ekitike would be able to do the false 9 role. I just don't think it's what they'd be the best at. That's something you would more ascribe to someone like Julian Alvarez or Matteo Retegui. I have no doubt that they could do it, but I just think if we do sign someone like that, we should play more to their strengths. In this case, their strengths are being channel runners, people who run in behind, people who find the spaces they want in wide or central areas and run in behind. So I was more looking to just optimize those things as opposed to, I don't know, trying to fit them into a place that I maybe don't think that they're the most optimal in. The next comment was, do you think McConnell can play the Wharton role, given that Slot is a very huge fan? Well, I think that James McConnell has a higher potential than the likes of Tyler Morton, but I do think at this stage he's a much worse player. Now, I do think he has a lot of the tools to become a Curtis Jones level midfielder, like a decent squad player, but I ultimately don't really think he'll make it at Liverpool, but I do think that he'll develop into a very solid player for a Premier League side. Now, I do think that Slot will keep him in the team this season as probably 5th choice in the pivot, but I do see that there's a chance that maybe he impresses in preseason and either becomes 4th choice or goes out on loan, where we bring him back later with the intention of maybe having him as 4th or 3rd choice. But I don't really see a world where he's ever starting for Liverpool. Wharton would be a good signing. I do think you're underestimating Gravenberch's passing ability. He utilized it at Ajax but deferred to Trent at Liverpool, like Mac and Dom deferred to Trent with set pieces. I do agree that Mac and Dom deferred to Trent with set pieces, and I do think Gravenberch is pretty good short passing, and he did have fairly good passing at Ajax, but there's a couple of caveats here. Number one, Ryan Gravenberch has been in and around the professional football scene since he was about 16-17 at Ajax. In the Eredivisie, the league is much slower, and you get a lot more space in midfield. Because of that, it's a lot easier for technical players who might have some of these things in their bag to execute these passes. We even saw, I think it was at the Euros or maybe the Nations League for the Netherlands, where Ryan Gravenberch had that massive switch to the likes of Xavi Simons, and then Xavi Simons failed to score. But I think in international football, people are less likely to press and close you down. There's a lot less organization. So players with high technical levels are able to perform for their national teams where they might not be able to do the same thing in the league. I think because of the nature of the Premier League and how much pressing and physicality there is and how quick it is, Ryan Gravenberch's passing simply just takes too much time. If you actually look at some of his statistics, it takes him a very long time to release a pass compared to a lot of other players. I think a lot of it has to do with his mentality. He's much more of a carry first than pass first midfielder, and because of that mentality problem, I think that his passing ability isn't that great because he doesn't really know when to execute, and at his current football age, I don't really see him changing that drastic of a personality / playing style. With the Dom situation, I referenced I wanted to ask if it's possible to get the best out of both Dom and Vertz, and I'm assuming if we do this, one player would have to be subbed or sacrificed. This is 100% true. You would have to sacrifice another player. I offered 2 different build-up shapes, a 3-2-5 and a 2-2-4-2. In the 2-2-4-2, McAllister is shoved back into the pivot in a much more restricted role. he can still kind of go forward, but he's not the final third connector. But in that case, Dom and Vertz get to play as more roaming 10s, and Dom would be able to be maximized and get a lot more attacking contribution. But this sacrifices Alexis McAllister. The other formation, the other build-up style would sacrifice Dom for Mac. Personally, I think Mac's a better player than Dom, so I would try to maximize him. But I do see a world where maybe you want to do the opposite, and it is, in fact, possible to get the best out of both. If we're pressing in a 4-2-4 and the opposition has more numbers in midfield, how do you press effectively? Well, I initially answered this by saying that this is Slot's risk that he was willing to take. But this comment is completely correct. We can utilize a 4-4-2 structure where we pack more players into midfield in order to counteract this problem. We would still use similar principles, but we'd only have 2 people really pressing high. This would really make us look a lot different from Klopp's side, but the principles in an Arne Slot team actually aren't that different. And this is actually where you would be able to see the clear differences between a Klopp side and a Slot side. So I do think that we might see a 4-4-2 structure more often against teams that either have more technical midfields like PSG or even more physical midfields. You might see it against Newcastle next season, for example. I think calling Klopp Style as chaos is disrespectful to what it was, aggressive and relentless with style. Chaos makes it sound like it was random and lacked control. So I have 2 things to say here. First of all, I do think it was a little disrespectful for me to call Klopp Style disrespectful. I think what Klopp demonstrated up until the second half of the 21-22 season was incredible. It was very aggressive, relentless. We controlled the game through counter-pressing. We had a very organized press, and we had good forwards to finish off chances. But I do think Linder's ball, which is what we played in the second half of the 21-22 season up until Klopp's departure, is random and effectively lack control. Linder's attempts to suffocate teams and maintaining possession in the final third without really creating the sorts of chances that you would expect from that style of football. Linders likes to call this intensity, but in reality what it did is it turned our football games into basketball games where we were often high up the pitch and conceded high XG counterattacks that often led to us conceding, and it would take us conceding first to have even any adaptations to that style. So I do think that's why I labeled it as chaotic, but maybe it would have been more logical for me to have put a photo of Pep Linders instead of Jurgen Klopp. We're especially actually seeing this at the Al Hilal versus Man City game, where Man City conceded so many terrible chances to Al Hilal because Al Hilal had robust midfielders like Sergej Milinkovic-Savic and Ruben Neves, alongside fast attackers like Malcolm, who were able to abuse the fact that they were using this seemingly controlled but actually incredibly chaotic style of football that Linders introduced. And the last comment is someone was saying that the volume bar is useless and it's creating a distraction. The reason I implemented it was when you look at people like James Alcott, they have this talking head style where they actually have their camera with their face. I don't really want to put my face in these videos, so I decided to provide an alternative visual that you can kind of see that represents me in like this audio visualizer. But comment down below if you do think I should get rid of it, and if I see enough comments saying yes, then I'll get rid of it for future videos. And finally, this is a community poll that I put out that I'd like you to vote on. It's for content on other teams. Should I make a separate channel or post that on this channel? Now, this is how each option would work. If I were to make a separate channel, I would post videos on that every other day, and sometimes they would maybe be more specific and go into the weeds of other teams, while I'd still post a video on this channel roughly every other day. If I posted on this channel, it would be 1-to-1. I'd do YouTube videos on Liverpool every other day, and in the gap days, I would do it on other teams, but they would likely be more general on other teams, as there's no point in a Liverpool channel really getting into the weeds of another team. So I'm just putting that out there. And so that's it for Extra Time. Remember to subscribe, comment, like the video, and follow me on Twitter. And yeah, thanks for watching.